Works and looking at those public works projects that I think people saw the stimulus as intending to fund and to move, getting people back to work with construction jobs and providing some of those basic core infrastructure needs of the city. We learned last week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, that we were well north of 30% now spent out of our overall stimulus dollars, which is still too low a number, I think, for all of us to be satisfied, but certainly a lot higher than we had read about a couple weeks earlier in the newspaper. We also heard that the Bureau of Street Lighting is well ahead of its schedule, and we learned some of the ins and outs of why the Bureau of Street Services can't just press a button and turn on the money. Also learned about how the federal requirements, we were one of the few places that actually could use our city workers for those street paving projects. It was faster, but also made a lot of sense, especially when we're looking at cutbacks through the city's workforce. Today we're going to be looking at the Bureau of Engineering and the Bureau of Sanitation. We have item number 1 before us first, and we have our city engineer here and the Bureau of Engineering to give us an update.
Good morning. Gary Moore, City Engineer for the City of Los Angeles, joined here by Ted Allen from our Project Award and Control Division. First project that I'd like to talk about is the Los Angeles River Greenway and Tampa Avenue Resurfacing Project.
Can you give us an overview of how much money Bureau of Engineering is receiving first?
Approximately $8.4 million was secured by the Bureau of Engineering for the 3 projects that I'll be describing. The other thing that we did is we also used the money with non-ARA money also so that we could increase the scopes of the project. And that was challenging, but it's very rewarding that I think the residents of Los Angeles will extremely benefit from the partner sharing of all the money sources. The first project, Los Angeles River Greenway and Tampa Avenue Resurfacing Project, I'm happy to say that it has been awarded and by the Board of Public Works. This project here is a $5.2 million project that's actually going to be building approximately 1 mile length of a bikeway in the San Fernando Valley in Council District Number 3, Council Member Zine's district. And what we'll be doing here is actually building a 13-foot wide bikeway. And there'll be solar lighting installed, there'll be benches, drinking fountains, and it also is a multi-benefit project, and that we'll be having stormwater treatment of the surrounding areas. We're building a bioswale along this stretch, so it's a very exciting project for everybody involved in this. And on this particular project, there's $3.7 million of ARA funding for this particular project. And we were able to save some money on another project, and actually, originally we'd only asked for $2 million, but we had some savings on another project, so that's why we got it up to $3.7 million. Because of this project is along the Los Angeles River, physical construction will begin this April, and we anticipate the construction finishing in the summer of 2012, and that's the deadline for the final building is until July of 2015, so we anticipate finishing the projects 3 years before we are required to by the grant.
The money was first awarded at what date?
Let me see here. Yeah. Ted, I think, has that. We have that here.
It was October 2009.
Okay, so you probably can anticipate the next question. So for the person out there, we're in a tough economy. We get this money October 2009. It's now almost February 2011. Walk us through why that isn't slow.
Sure. Once again, it was working with the other funding sources that we had to get in place so that we could leverage the ARA funding along with the other funding sources to make this project a more robust project, a larger project. So working with all the funding sources and the requirements, it took us a little bit of time. Also,
let's dig into that for a second. What was the process and why? Well, first of all, you've alluded to it, but what's the source of the additional funding? It said savings, but from what funding source?
So the other funding sources, first of all, were Metro, Bicycle Transportation Account, and the State Resources Proposition 50. And then, Ted, why don't you go ahead and talk about some of the challenges?
Yeah, if I could, we'd kind of take these out of order. The third project on our list is the resurfacing at 4 bridge locations. That one actually awarded first. It awarded July of 2010. And, there's a lot of work that goes in prior to award. We had a new state DBE program, and you have to go through the whole bid and award process and all of that. So
when you said that was awarded first, but the other one was 2009, did you mean first from the secondary source?
I'm sorry, I meant awarded to the contractor, not the grant award. The grant awards were all simultaneous.
Okay, so the first award was then. Gotcha. Sorry.
So we awarded that one by July of 2010, and we got very good bids with the slowing economy, and the bids came in more than $1 million below what we had estimated. So we were looking at maybe having to cut scope out of the Greenway projects because of not having enough Prop 50 and Metro grant money. So with the bids coming in low on the resurfacing at 4 locations, we decided to look at whether we could reprogram those funds to the other project, and Metro was agreeable to that. So, but you have to go through a lot of paperwork, and we got the money reprogrammed to the Greenway project. And then the plans had to be revised a little bit to put the scope back in that was going to be taken out. And the Greenway project had bid and we were holding for some time because the bids had come in higher than the amount of money we had prior to reprogramming these funds. So there was a lot going on. It wasn't just sitting around, and staff did a good job in that they not only got the $1.2 million reprogrammed from the resurfacing at 4 locations project, but they also got some additional Metro money, I guess must have been returned from another agency. So we actually ended up with more money than we had started with. And with the rainy season, as Gary mentioned, the Greenway projects have work along the LA River, so we didn't want to be working during the rainy season, so that's why it's been waiting until this April to start. And work should, as you can see in the expenditure graph in the project sheet, we should start expending very rapidly once we get going in April.
Okay. That construction period is expected to last till September? Sorry, no.
Through summer of 2012.
Sorry, 2012, excuse me. Okay. And so presumably, is it just the beginning of the construction you want to avoid the rainy season, but we're going to be through another rainy season mid-construction, or?
They'll prioritize all the work along the LA River to get that done before the next rainy season, and then there's some resurfacing work that they may do concurrently, or, that could go into the next rainy season without any trouble.
So I guess part of my question is, and you're obviously the ones who do the work, and I've loved working with the Bureau of Engineering in my time in office, but do you feel that there's anything we can be doing to expedite this? I mean, there's always a good and logical explanation. This is the second hearing we've been doing on this where people say, it's, for street resurfacing, it's the utilities, and we have to make sure there's not utility holds before we pave a street. Here, it's, working our way through the Metro process, et cetera. But for the observer out there, they're asking, we're in a crisis, here's stimulus money, we need to be able to tell the story of, well, sorry, Washington just didn't design this in a way that moves quickly, but then they say, well, other cities seem to have moved it more quickly. What lessons are you learning internally? Are you satisfied we've done everything? How do you answer those sorts of criticisms, and what can we do? Because I think even those of us that were unsatisfied with some of the numbers that were put out there publicly, we've been spending more than has been reported, also know that our process of awarding contracts and doing that for all sorts of policy reasons, it's not just the fault of bureaus and departments, is slow. Do you feel that that's a fair criticism, or would you respond to that differently?
Well, I think, our partner, the Bureau of Sanitation, they'll be coming up, I believe, to talk about 5 grants, and the Bureau of Engineering on 4 of those provide the design and manage the construction. And you'll hear about the progress of those projects that have progressed quite well. You're working with, so on these particular projects and working through some of the details, like we said, that overall, I think the residents of Los Angeles are going to get an outstanding project, and it's unfortunate that, that it took a little while to switch out the money and get the additional money, and you never anticipate that it took the time it did. So we're disappointed by that, but overall, I think the benefit and the result it will be an outstanding project. And as Ted mentioned, I think there was definitely some learning curve about as the new disadvantaged business enterprises that we had to learn some of those that requirements for us. So I think everybody was learning, and we were as disappointed. We wanted the projects out sooner. So I definitely understand the questions and also the anticipation that the money, these projects weren't simple projects, meaning that I know some of the other cities, when you are just going to pave a street, it's less of a challenge than the interfacing, and then there's multiple funding sources, so it adds complexities, but at the same time, it has enabled us to do more than we would have been able to do.
Well, let me ask the question just one last time a different way, and I appreciate those answers. There are all sorts of policy things this body and others engage in, making sure we reach out to disadvantaged businesses, make sure we pay a living wage, make sure we do all sorts of things that are social goods. We have internal processes that bureaus and departments set up between each other. In times of crisis, what would you change to speed things up? And that means sometimes the loss of other things that we've said are good, so don't worry about speaking bluntly, but I think part of that tension is what, in these hearings, I want to get to the bottom of. If we continue to be in crisis, or if we face another crisis, we shouldn't reinvent that wheel. I mean, we've got people in Sacramento right now who are, happen to be Democrats who are sometimes more associated with environmental protections, et cetera. The President Pro Tem of the Senate saying, maybe we need to look at CEQA, and well, that's a great thing. We want to protect our environment. We have to be able to speed things up in moments of crisis as well. That's the frustration, I think, of the average citizen who's saying, look, all those things are important, but we've got unemployment actually going up in this state last month. We've got people out of work. We've got an economy we need to get going. We need infrastructure we need to build. And we need to rely on you who are in the trenches to give us some of that advice of places to think about what slows things up that we can affect around here or that you can change internally, having learned those lessons.
We put together a list of, on construction contracts, of about 20 items that contractors have to do during the bid time and during construction. I think it would be great to look at, that list, look at potential so that, I know these projects are all awarded now, but there'll be other times where we want to expedite projects and be a proactive approach where we would already say, well, we're going to relax our requirements on A, B, and C, do it now before the crisis occurs, and so that we're all in agreement, because it is, like you said, public policy. Some of them are public policy, so I think it would be advantageous to have those discussions now, so that when we do have another stimulus or other opportunities for that the money needs to be spent very quickly, because these policies took a lot of years to get there. There was a lot of deep discussion, a lot of, there was a lot of need for these policies, and so I would just say that we would do that, and I think that would be something very proactive that we could do and look at that. So we would have that in place and say, well, this policy, we're going to, put it on hiatus because of expediting our projects.
Walk me through the jobs, the full-time equivalents for each of these that we're going to be looking at.
For the first project on the Greenway, it'll be averaging about 8 people per month. For the Greenway on Winnetka, it's about a 6-person project. And finally, on the resurfacing, it's approximately 6 full-time equivalents a month also.
So about 20 altogether?
Correct.
Okay.
A little over 20.
All right. Good. Any other stuff on this you'd like to walk through?
No, we're just we're happy for the funding, and like I said, I appreciate your question that how we can be ready, because we felt the same urgency, and we want these projects out on the street, and so we appreciate the neighborhoods as we do a lot of these resurfacing projects. It's almost 3 miles of resurfacing. We've done 1 mile of that already, and we know that it's a short-term inconvenience, but we appreciate the residents' patience and understanding as we implement these projects.
Absolutely. Okay. Great. Anybody from CO or Mayor's office want to chime in on any of this stuff? Or, you all right? Okay, I see some thumbs in the up position for those who can't see. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Actually, Rushmore, you want to add any thoughts?
Yes, good morning, Councilman. Relative to the contracting process, as I think Gary's point is well taken, and that these processes need to be reviewed now. What happened with these ARA contracts, most of which have gone through the process now, has taken a long time, not just with Bureau of Engineering or Sanitation, but many of the departments, they've had to go through this slow process. So from a larger perspective outside just ARA, looking at the overall contracting processes, I've seen the flow charts of how contracts work within the city, and it's mind-boggling the various steps one has to go through, or an organization has to go through to get these contracts awarded. And having a list of those priorities for the city as a whole, as policies, understanding what we may need to forego if we've got critical deadlines that we need to meet for these types of projects in the future. And what we'll do is, as the ARA team between the CAO and the Mayor's office come back with a list of any outstanding contracts that still need to be awarded, and see if there's areas that we may be able to push forward.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that for this to pilot. Obviously, as our city engineer said, there's long discussions, there's years. I mean, before I was a council member, I was here lobbying to make sure businesses weren't doing business in Burma for human rights reasons, and I felt passionately about that. Being on this side, I don't know how much the government of Burma is looking at the City of Los Angeles contracts and whether they care, and I've talked to businesses that really do want to get in here and do want to produce jobs, and it is a balance between those things. And you know, there's other ways of achieving those social ends, putting point system in instead of having 10 stops and 10 pieces of paper. We can just kind of, you know, be self-reporting checkoffs. There's different things we can do, and I would love, because I know we have a ton of money that still is to be spent out. There's contracts that we probably are drawing up right now, to look if you can help us, Rushmore, find a couple of those, make those real models, and maybe it's something we can learn even after this economic crisis to be more efficient city government.
I think the list will be fairly small in that, because I know a lot of the contracts have now been awarded, and we're going to see a ramp up in expenditures, but we'll certainly look for those contracts that have yet to been awarded and see what we can come up with.
Great. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. I have one public comment card on this one. Arnold Sachs, item number 1. And there's no general public comment, Mr. Sachs. This is a special meeting, so it's just items 1 and 2.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate you asking some of those questions, but I really don't appreciate some of the answers. The progress of the projects that you talk about is predicated on accomplishing the paperwork needed to fund them. The gentleman said eventually we'll have outstanding projects. Eventually, the ocean will make it to the red line, downtown, the subway to the sea, or the sea will be to the subway. The learning curve, we've heard talk about the Mayor's 12-2 project, eliminating the bureaucracy in getting permits. Why not expand it to get it for jobs? 12-2, 2-12, 10-4, 6-8. You've just talked. I've been in government business. I've worked with the government. I've seen these policies. What is taking so long? When the times were good, the same policies were in effect. Now the times, excuse my French, suck. And the policies are still in effect. Who's in charge? The mayor and the city council managed to negotiate to failure to get a $30 million pay raise for 20,000 city employees. How can you do that and not look at the policies regarding permitting and getting the money spent? A ton of money, Mr. President? That's only counting our funds. You just heard the redevelopment agency has over $930 million. And where are the projects on that pipeline?
You can bring the scope back to what we had jurisdiction over,
Just
please.
saying, you said a ton of money available. That's 2 tons of money, because that's more money than you have what's available for ARA. So I say, thank you for your time, answers, and attention, but let's have some action.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. We'll go next to item number 2. If I could ask the Bureau of Sanitation to come forward. All right. Good morning.
Good morning, Councilmember.
Good to see you.
Council President Eric Garcetti, Enrique Zaldivar, Director of the Bureau of Sanitation. I am joined by Adel Hash-Khalil, who is the Assistant General Manager, and Arnel Aguilar, who is our Grants Manager. We have 5 projects under ARA, and we are happy to tell you that...
How much total money is that, Tim?
We have a total of 8.2 million, of which 91% has been expended. 75% of...
That's what I like to hear. Don't worry. 91%. We finally have a winner. Not, it's a competition.
And 75% of the money has been received. So we are happy, obviously, with our progress. I'm glad to hear that you are too.
We're a little bit in the red, so we're waiting for reimbursements, I assume, for that difference between, you said, 91 expended?
Yes, 75% yet to
awarded?
be, 75% received so far, so there is a gap there
Gotcha.
with regards to the billing cycle and when we submit.
Let's walk through them.
So the 5 projects that we're talking about are all, 4 out of the 5 are stormwater, water quality related, many of which you are very familiar with. First one is the Vista Rainwater Harvesting Irrigation Project. It's really sort of a leading edge kind of a concept where we're making use of parkland to be able to divert water from a storm drain, bringing it into essentially a large storage tank where the water can then be cleaned up of debris and trash and other pollutants, stored and then be used for irrigation during the dry season or dry winter season, if you will.
So we had an area that was parking lot or under the tennis courts?
It's actually under a tennis court in the Mar Vista Park in West Los Angeles, Sawtelle Boulevard.
Gotcha.
That project has been completed in construction, and with the most recent rains, actually water went into the storage tank, but it's still under the optimization stage, so we haven't yet used the water to irrigate. We're hoping that in this rainy season, though, that we are able actually to do that. The construction phase is completed.
And we started that in July of last year and finished in December? Is that I'm sorry, July of 2009, and we finished it in December of this past year?
Yes, the construction started actually in May of 2010.
Okay.
Construction completed in May of 2010. The construction of it, this is one of those projects that has multiple sources of funding, and so I know one of your questions to Gary earlier was, how could a project move faster? Well, in the case of a project like this, the impetus of it is not only the ARA funding, but it's other funding that are moving it along.
So what was the source of the other funding in this case?
PROPO.
There's PROPO?
Yes. Yes.
So was this already on the PROPO list, and the ARA funds then helped displace some of those funds to be used elsewhere? Okay.
That's correct. Some of these projects we actually had on the list of other state grants, Prop 84 and others, which, as you may recall, the state diverted or froze a lot of the grant funding. So this was a good backfill by using our funding.
Okay. Let's go to the next one.
Project number 2, it's a series of low-flow diversion structures, all of it with the intended purpose of taking polluted stormwater and bringing it into our wastewater collection and treatment system to meet water quality standards, in this case bacteria in Santa Monica Bay, the TMDL program. This is related to that. 6 diversion structures, and all of them in the Santa Monica Bay. This project is also completed. We have 90% of the money received.
And this does, walk us through, I can see it here, but for the public, in just plain English terms, this takes stormwater and the pollutants in them and does what exactly with them? It stores that stormwater, cleans it up, puts it into sanitary sewers? Is that?
Yes. So we take the water from a storm drain, build a diversion structure within the pipe, have the water then during low flow, in this case now dry winter flows, have it get over to the neighboring sewer pipe. In some cases, we have to build a pump station to be able to get it, depending on the elevations between the two pipes. Once we get it in the sanitary sewer pipe, it gets over to the, in this case, Hyperion treatment plant.
So normally stormwater, which would just untreated wash out to the Santa Monica Bay, we have 2 different systems of stormwater and sewers. It now moves it over to the sewers because sewer water gets treated in one of our plants, so that will clean it up and make sure it doesn't head to the bay.
That's exactly right.
All right. And when did the construction start on that?
So let me look at the schedule there. Arnell, help me with that.
The bid and award was completed for Santa Monica as well as Mar Vista on May 2009. And construction was completed for Mar Vista on May 2010. Santa Monica's construction was completed October 2010.
And these were private contractors or city workers?
Private contractors.
Okay. And the majority of the funding, the RF funds just was a small portion of these? Is that right? Most of this is Prop O again, or a different source of funding?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, for the Santa Monica low flow diversion, the entire program is a $30 million program, and this $5 million is part of the $30 million. So we use the ARA funding to do 5 of these 18 locations, and the sewer that we have to build to provide the capacity. So the program is $30 million, 5 was paid by ARA, and 25 was paid from Proposition O.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. And then we have the drains, the grates?
Yes. As anyone who rides a bike in L.A. would have noticed that some of the grates that were installed years back were not necessarily bike-friendly, and this program, we're excited about being able to get funding to be able to replace those, to make them bicycle-friendly. Essentially, the grates would now have openings that are not too large for the bicycle tires can get entangled and caught up.
I don't know if Channel 35 can zoom in on just about where my face is, but I can do a before and after of the grates here. Let's see if we... I know there's a camera up there. Okay, so here's the old ones where you get your bicycle wheels caught in there, and then I'll try to keep them in the same place. Then here we have new vertical and horizontal lines so that the bicyclists won't get caught. I think a lot of us have been caught in those grates before. So how many of these are on?
So the universal bike grates in this city, we have 2,841 total grates at roughly 1,900 locations. Through the ARA program, we will have replaced, we have completed already 1,300 grates replacements at 879 locations, and by March, we will add 500 more grates at 333 locations. So going back to the total number of these that exist in the city, 2,800 total exist in the city, and we will have replaced through the ARA grant roughly 1,800 of them, so more than half.
And in terms of sanitation can justify this because this catches trash better too by having the additional horizontal lines in them, more or less? I mean, because you're not in the bicycle business, right?
Safety, see, for us, one is safety and ensuring that the exposure and the liability, but the safety of the public is important, but also has a benefit of having big pieces of trash going into the catch basin. That's correct. So there's a water quality benefit to it, too.
And so that leaves us about $1,000 to figure out some way to fund in the future?
That's correct.
Okay. Any plans for that, just as an aside? Or we're not sure where that money will come from?
Not yet, but, we have a very aggressive grant manager here who
Looking
never
everywhere?
stopped looking. Good. And never stops looking.
All right.
With the MTA call for projects, that's not always an opportunity, and transportation funding. So
Okay,
that'll be good.
great. All right. And then there was one other thing that you guys had?
We have a very small, the fifth grant we have, it's $37,000, $500, but it's for a very important program, and this is to work with, obviously, in concert with the port, in which this is a grant from the AQMD to help folks who own trucks that are, well, they're called drayage trucks. These are the short-haul trucks that take containers from the port to the local distribution centers, and helping them understand the opportunities for receiving grants to change out their trucks to clean trucks. And so it pays for some of our staff salaries, and it pays for the materials needed to conduct workshops, educational workshops. So it's small in amount, but it's important in purpose.
Okay. I have two sheets. Are there two different $37,500 programs, or is that the same one?
It's just the same one.
That's it.
Only
Same one.
yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So I'll ask you the same question. Is there anything, well, you're luckier to have come here having spent out 91% of your funds, are there any lessons that you would give us in terms of making sure things move quickly? You also had, I mean, obviously you're working with Bureau of Engineering, so they deserve some partial credit for this too. And we had Propo funds in place, but any lessons or suggestions that you have for us in terms of the process of making sure this money gets spent as quickly as it was able to be?
Yes, certainly our own experience with ARA, but also it's complemented by our experience in grants in general. There's always a catch-22 question about cash flow and how do you front the money on a project that is all entirely on a reimbursement basis. And that can be a huge impediment in being able to, one, go after the money, and two, figuring out the cash flow so that you're able to keep the bills paid well until you get paid back. So that's something very important, whether the city as a whole could have a way of having a fund that would be used for grant opportunities where departments need not necessarily have to always come up with the front funding. That's one. We share the same concerns, obviously, as Gary does with regards to the depth of, in this case, reporting. There's an awful lot of paperwork that's involved in grants. ARA was no exception. Our experience with federal grants, for sure, is that you always have to have an eye toward the inevitable audit that will come a year later, 2 years later, sometimes 5 years later. So the paperwork is if not cumbersome, for sure, one that you have to spend an awful lot of time and effort in ensuring that you have everything in place. So does that inherently slow down the process? Well, I think it does. But if you overlook the prospect of a future audit, which we know always happens, then you may be compromising. So how much faster, how much agile can we be? I can't not tell you exactly how we would redraw that balance of, foregoing certain things when you know that there's going to be an audit that will be coming up at some point down the road.
And did you watch the State of the Union address the other day?
Yes.
So I know the federal government and the president have announced a desire to try to streamline some of their regulations and bureaucracy. This may be a good moment for us to take some of these lessons and Rushmore, maybe we can be looking at some of these lessons and actually put something to the White House on this as they're looking at, it's a rare opening where they want to reform themselves and, make sure that salmon aren't caught by 3 departments, but just by 1, among other things. But thank you for that feedback, and congratulations on moving this forward. It's a good news story, and we look forward to these projects improving the quality of life of folks here. And full-time equivalents, I'm sorry, how many were there total, again, these projects?
We have it by project. Do we have the total?
The total of jobs as a total is 16 jobs.
16?
Yeah.
All right. Great, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate
Just
it.
one thing,
please.
Councilman, I want to just thank the staff from Bureau of Engineering and County Administration for working with us, with the grant managers, with the planners, but without their help, this will not be possible. So I want to acknowledge the staff and Gail's job for doing a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We do have one public comment card on this. Mr. Sachs, would you like to come forward?
Yes, thank you again. Arnold Sachs. I'd like to also congratulate the Bureau of Sanitation for its goal of reaching 91% spent. 3 projects. The first one was completed in May 2010. Do you have a cost estimate on that? And the second project that was completed in October 2010, a cost estimate on that? Because they were talking about $9 million that they got in our funding. And so the reason I asked for those 2 costs, because the only project that's still ongoing is the bicycle grading project. And I was wondering how many grates have been replaced as of now, because again, they said they spent 91% of their funding. And you said, Mr. President, that you're looking hopefully to find another source of revenue. Well, you still have almost $900,000 left of ARA funding. So I was just wondering, that money is going to be applied for the grates. How much does each grate cost to be replaced? Because you said at the end of the ARA funding, they're going to replace 1,800. So my question involves how many are done now, and how many more will be done to make 1,800? Because in order to reach that goal of 1,800 grates, they'll have to spend $900,000. So I was just wondering on the math of what those costs are.
I'm sure the Bureau would be happy to answer that. I can answer if you want. They did say, you might have missed it, they said there's 1,300 that were replaced at 879 locations and 500 more by March at 330 other locations.
So then if 500 grates will cost $900,000.
I'm not sure if that's the exact numbers, but I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you about it.
I'm just looking at the math that they gave you and they gave the public in the hearing. They spent 91% of their money. They got $9 million. That comes out to like $8,200,000, which leaves a balance of $900,000, give or take a couple of thousand. So how do the cost estimates work out? It's just a question, just a concerned non-citizen would like to know for the citizens of the city. Thank you.
For Mr. Sachs, anybody else in the public, these charts that we have are available again at our city's website. It answers those exact questions as well as the oral answers that were given earlier that I'm sorry you might have missed, Mr. Sachs. That's available at recovery.lacity.org. And that will give you the details of what's been spent out, and we've been giving very detailed information and making that available to the public as quickly as we get it, as well for transparency and oversight. Thank you. That will adjourn the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Reinvestment, and we'll next meet, I think, 2 weeks from today for the next departments. Thank you very much.